extremely proud. And it's crazy because when I talk about me, a lot of times I have these vicarious experiences where it's like out of body. And I'm like,
who is that dude?
I'm extremely proud of this man.
Yeah.
I'm extremely proud of this journey that I've been on. You know, because oftentimes you're put in very, very dark places. And if you stay there long enough and you hold on to the rope, by the time you open your eyes, you'll be able to see in the dark. And for me, this is what this is about. This is like the nation, in fact, the world being able to carry this story as it ripples into the future. This is 34 years later. Me being introduced as a pariah, as the scum of the earth, now to being the embodiment of Nas's hip hop lyric when he was married to Khalees, when he said, I want somebody from my hood to be my councilman. So that's what this is, man, this is a moment.
Wow. I mean, it is a moment. And speaking of, councilmen, and again, like we have a personal relationship. You was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
You had space for your family.
A lot of space.
And you were on the speaking circuit, you were doing your thing. And I remember you saying to me that you were interested in getting into politics. And I remember me feeling afraid and kind of knowing politics and feeling like, because you just have a heart for the people and the community. And I was kind of like, I don't know, like New York politics? You know what I mean? And you're going all around the world inspiring people with your story. What made you, again, like you're living comfortably, you're doing well, say, you know what, I want to go back to New York, the scene of the crime, as you called it, and I want to run for office. And so what went into that decision?
It's crazy. I was somewhere speaking. And I remember this like yesterday. I was somewhere speaking and I remember there was a break. I might have been at WPC or something like that, But I was standing there and an elderly woman was looking at me. And she said, I could see that you're trying to figure out what's next. I mean, I've been all over the world. I've spoken all over the United States, got the opportunity to first go into Canada to speak and then go into the Caribbean to speak. And then I started traveling to the Middle East and I spoke in Riyadh, spoke in Senegal, spoke in Somalia. I mean, I've been, just been graced with this amazing journey of being an inspiration. But what I felt like was that every time I came home, and even though I was living in the greater Atlanta area, for me, home is always New York and has always been New York. Every time I came home, I would get the, nod or that fist that's like on the, punch in the air on my title of that particular book. I would get that, but I would also still see the pain that people were experiencing. In many ways, people looked at me and said, this is one of the ones who was fortunate enough to make it. And it's like, well, now what? I'm looking around, I'm seeing what's going on. And Keith Wright, the former assemblyman, whose son, by the way, is my campaign manager.
Wow.
Whose father, by the way, is Judge Bruce Wright, who you all may know wrote a book called Black Robes, White Justice. His nickname by the enemy was Cut 'em Loose Bruce. That wasn't a nickname that we gave him. That was a nickname that the enemy gave him. This guy was always cutting people loose and giving them a second chance and so forth and so on. But Keith Wright said to me, he said, Yusef, you are our modern day, you are our modern day and our very own Nelson Mandela. And I took exception to that, and I was like, man, here's a hero of mine. On the outside looking in, when I read his story and I read about how he had to leave anger and bitterness in the prison because if he took it out with him, it would destroy him. To realize that this is a man who did 27 years in prison, but still came out of that particular hell, if you will, to lead his people. I said, damn, is it possible? Now I don't know if I told you this. While I was in prison and I read the Bible and the Quran, and I came to that story that you could literally overlap and it'd be like a twin story, everything matching. The story of Joseph in the Bible, the story of Yusef in the Quran. A young man who went to prison for a crime he didn't commit. Damn. While he was in prison, he was gifted with gifts that allowed him to heal the land, to teach them what they needed to do in order to be able to survive, so to speak. And coming out of there, they said he was the greatest statesman that ever lived in that part of the world. I mean, I was 16 when I read that. Wow. And I was like, is it possible? I mean, my mother and my father followed tradition. They named me 7 days after I was born, but they named me my first name after a prophet who was accused of rape and was sent to prison and came out of the prison to become one of the greatest statesmen that ever lived in Egypt. And I took exception to that. I'm like, wow. But of course I was 16, so I kind of was like, I still got to do this time. I still got to make sure time doesn't do me. I got to figure out, how do I survive this and still follow instructions from these scriptures that I'm reading? Yeah. And so fast forward, when Keith Wright says that to me, I'm like, it's sparking that same fuse that was there. That seed that was watered is now beginning to be like, it's starting to pulsate. And of course, as I started the campaign and I'm going around the campaign trail, a lot of the narrative was like, he just got a story. That's all he has is a story. And I love when that article came out in Esquire. One of the first things that one of the elders in my family wrote in a group chat, she said, they'll finally get the opportunity to read about your true heart. Yeah. How this is not just, I need a job and I'm trying to, listen, I was making over $1 million a year as a motivational speaker. This is a pay cut. But the opportunity that's there is greater, because it's one thing to say, I got a great house, I got nice cars, my family is doing well. But what about humanity? What about the rest of us? And if I went through this, I have to know that I didn't go through this for no reason. It wasn't just for me.
Right. So when that's so beautiful. When the entire kind of New York political establishment goes up against you now, you weren't the establishment pick. You really kind of were the outsider kind of coming in. There was a very well-known politician in New York. If I can say the brother's name.
Yeah, absolutely.
Charles Rangel, who kind of almost like made fun of your name. and kind of had to come back and apologize. But when you see like Rangel and the mayor, Eric Adams, and kind of those establishment politicians backed your opponents, was there a moment where you felt like, what you were up against maybe was insurmountable, or?
Nah. See, I was walking around the street. And I got to tell you, like, it's different. It's one thing to, like, this for me will never be politics as usual. I still say that I'm not a politician. And I say that because for me, politics is dirty, it's ugly. It's that quid pro quo, just to get along kind of thing, And I think that because I'm a person of faith, knowing that I'm going to be judged for everything that I do, that I'm not just doing this to, so to speak, right wrongs, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that I'm not a miracle maker. But if we talked about this earlier, if my people want to see a miracle, we can produce a miracle, and we can produce it while I'm in office. And the way that we do that is by believing in ourselves again. Because see, if we believe in ourselves, first of all, understanding the political process to be that everything that we see goes through the political process. The streets that are getting, filled when De La Soul said potholes in my lawn, I had no idea what they was talking about until I went to Atlanta, and I'm like, there's no potholes in the lawn. And I'm not even sure if this is what they were talking about, but as I understood it, I said, what is our lawns but the streets? We don't get an opportunity. Like every time I would come home, for me it was beautiful because I would come back home to Atlanta and I would have this, it would be like a reset. I go back to my backyard and I'm like, the birds are chirping. I look over there, it's hummingbirds. I look out the window and it's deer walking through my yard. Bunny rabbits jumping around. This is like an everyday thing. Yeah. I look at the sky and I swear, if I showed you, I got photos of this, it looks like The Simpsons. That sky. Yeah. What? Like a blue sky with perfect cloud, like everything is perfect. Yeah. And for me, it was that reset that was necessary. But I got to tell you, to be in the moment of walking the neighborhood and the community, and they would tell me, look, man, I know you wear these, I got shoes on right now, They said, no hard bottom shoes, brother. You might need some sneakers, because you're gonna be walking around. On Juneteenth, I had a white suit on. This is on, like, you can still see me on social media with this suit on. I had a white suit on, hard bottom shoes. I walked almost the whole strip in the community, and I didn't feel tired. People were lifting me up all along the way. They were engaging me. They were telling me about their real concerns, about what's really going on. Because yes, we need affordable housing and we need all of the other stuff that people are talking about, safe streets, great education. But when you think about the charters that our cities are under, all of that stuff is included. My question is, how do I solve for and figure out how is it that we pay taxes? And they say taxation without representation is tyranny. Where is our representation? Where is the money going? My mother always says, follow the money. Where is the money going that is supposed to undergird the fact that I can be born and know that I was born on purpose? When you go into any of our neighborhoods, anywhere in impoverished communities, anywhere in the margins of life, and you ask them, how many of y'all think y'all gonna be dead or in jail before you reach the age of 21? Every hand is raised. But then when you ask them this, if you had the opportunity to plan your life, how many of you would add that to your life? No one raises their hands. So that means that there's something even far more sinister that's going on in our communities.
Sure.
Something that is allowing it to be okay for that to be our reality. And I'm saying, no, our parents didn't create us to be born mistakes. And if we're moving throughout our lives as if we are mistakes, that's what we're going to produce. But imagine if we begin to believe in ourselves again, knowing that we were born on purpose and with a purpose, raising our vibrations up to a whole nother level. That means when Mayor Eric Adams in New York, the black mayor in New York, said, and I took exception to this language, he said to the next group of police officers that were graduating, he said, I'm graduating the next guardians of society. We got to plant seeds like that in the future generations. Because if everybody comes in and it's like the blue wall, then that same energy is still out there.
Right.
We got to change it all. We got to change the narrative.
Change the narrative. Beautiful, beautiful, brother. Speaking of changing the narrative, I want to just walk you through. This was 5 years ago.
Wow.
5 years ago, One Hood had our first Artivist Academy showcase at the Andy Warhol Museum. And our principal speaker 5 years ago was Chuck D. And if you remember on this day 5 years ago, if you were there, it was a snowstorm that hit Pittsburgh. Chuck D's flight was canceled. And so I just got off the phone with Chuck D saying, my flight got canceled, I can't make it. I turned around and Yusef was standing in front of me. He was not scheduled to be the speaker for this event.
We just flew in. My wife was like, there was something going on. Let's just fly in and surprise him.
Flew in, and I said, well, surprise! I got a surprise for you, Yusef. You're going to be speaking at this One Hood event. A few years before that, I want to say 3 years before that, we spoke at Point Park University. This was about the Scottsboro boys.
Yeah.
And when they came to me and said, we wanted you to speak after that showing, I said, well, I got the perfect guest to come join me to talk about that. And then 10 years ago,
Wow.
this is the first time we met.
Wow.
Oh, yeah, right. This was at an event in Harlem called the Million Youth March. And this is when you kind of had first started to share your story as a speaker. So, you know, because I think that's a significant moment. What events, whether a series of events, because I remember what inspires me most about your story is when you decided to be a speaker, you put time, you went to classes, you like really put the work in to become, you know, a speaker that can go all around the world. You didn't just pop up, you know, because some black people got it like that. You know, some black people, you give them a mic and they just come with it, you know what I'm saying? So was there a moment where you said, you know what, I want to go around the world and share my story? Was there a moment that happened that made you want to do that, and what was that?
Absolutely. So I got to tell you, when we were blessed in those moments of being able to tell our story, I'll never forget one of my first engagements. I'm standing on the stage and I look over and Ozzie Davis is on the stage with me.
Wow.
And I mean, back then, I didn't know how to speak. I was like, they said, Yusef Salaam, you want to say a few words? And I literally probably got up and said, thank you for having me, and sat back down. When I got the opportunity to meet Les Brown, I was so blown away by him because he had been teaching me before I met him just how to heal myself. I didn't know that speaking is like therapy. For me, it's like being able to be re-embraced by society. Like when I was in prison and the members of the Black Panther Party who were still there, the members of the Black Liberation Army who were still there, and many of them are still there if they haven't yet passed behind bars. You know, they would tell me, you know, how are you addressing your people when you write them, you know, when you write them? And I said, just like you all have taught us. May this letter reach you mentally, spiritually, and physically okay. And they said, well, you got to add the word psychosocial as well. And I said, well, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. And he said, and this is Brother Luke Man, who has since passed away as well. Brother Luke Man said, it is that ability for you to be seen as a valuable member of society. And therefore, you add value as opposed to detract. And I was like, wow. And so, meeting Les Brown after I started listening to his audio, I go as far back as having audio tapes.
Wow.
And then CDs. I had all that. I still got this stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is my stuff, right? One day I'm in Florida at an event that he puts on, and I'm in the front. I'm like that student that's, I'm catching every word and writing everything down. And I had to go to the restroom. But I'm in the front, and it's like 1,000 people in this audience. And so I make my way to the side door, go around, and, and when I came back, I tried to go back through that same side door, was locked. So I made my way back to a door that was open. I was in the back, but in the middle of the whole place. So I start making my way back to my seat in the front. I get about halfway through the crowd, and Les Brown is up there, and he's inspiring the people. And then he says, and you, young man. I looked around, I was like, what? He said, you the young man that went to prison, aren't you? I said, oh, shucks, yeah. He said, come up on stage and tell your story. This is my first time in front of a crowd like this. But I was like, oh, shucks, okay, yeah, I'm gonna go up there. So I go up there and I tell my story, and he says, yes, young man, yes. And then he told my story better than I told my story. And then he was looking at me and he said, you see what I just did there? He said, I wanna help you. I wanna train you. He said, you will be a better speaker than me. Wow. And for me, I was like, wow, but that piece of being able to constantly be in healing, people know the story of the Central Park Five. They know the story of the Central Park Jogger case, but they don't really know the story. Because what they know really is really a single narrative of what they have read in a newspaper or seen on a TV. But to be able to hear it from the horse's mouth, as they say, and to be accepted, to say, man, we want you, we need you, you are an inspiration. I was, New York, they changed the laws since I've been back. And it's against the law, at least when I left, to ride your bike on the sidewalk. And so it was, it was getting dark one day, and I'm still in New York. This is before I left, I'm in New York, and I'm like, man, I don't want to get hit by a car. Let me get on the sidewalk. So I take my bike and I start riding home, but I'm on the sidewalk. 2 officers snatched me off my bike, almost right next to where we are in this photo. Malcolm X Boulevard, 116th Street. Wow. Almost right there. They snatched me off my bike. Wow. Now, I was trained as a child by Master Little John Davis, who was one of the top 2 instructors in New York that taught jujitsu. The other one was Dr. Moses Powell. When I went to prison, the officers who believed that I wasn't supposed to be there, they also began to train me in different arts. One taught me Arnis, and then he went on further to teach me Tai Chi and told me that it would heal me. I went from, that song, 0 to 100 real quick? Yeah. I went from 0 to 1,000. And then I remembered that part of the challenge is for all of us to have enough of ourselves under control in moments like this.
Right.
This is the moment where I needed to remember, like that Sankofa, that sacred memory in Sankofa. I needed to remember that I have to fight again tomorrow.
True.
And so I put my bike in between myself and them, and I said, I see what y'all doing. Y'all trying to form on me. And then I explained to them who I was and how by them treating me the way they treated me was a disrespect to their badge. Because if you want people who want to be law-abiding citizens and you treat them like a criminal, the response that you get is what you get.
True.
When I finished, these two officers, I wish somebody was capturing this on, like, you know, people take out their phone back. Now everybody taking out their phone. They're not offering you no help.
True.
I wish somebody was taking out their phone at this moment. By the time I finished, they said, can we get your phone number so that you could be a liaison between us and our community?
Wow.
And so it was those moments where I realized that I had to tell these stories. Because these stories are stories that we all have, we all share. The story of what my mother went through has yet to be told. But when I tell you, like, when you see how she's depicted in film, I mean, these stories are more than just teachable moments. These are lesson plans on how, like my mother's story is a lesson plan on how you're supposed to advocate for your child.
Wow.
It's all of that.
So powerful. It's interesting because when I think of you,
Wow. Oh,
you and the police, you know, and it's you know, there's such a I would use the word like militancy, and how old were you in this picture?
I think I was still 15. This photo, the interesting thing about this photo is that I was bailed out. I got bailed out early. Like I may have only spent maybe 3 months at most in prison. Got bailed out. That folder was part of the court documents, and the book in my hand is the same Quran that my mother gave me when I went to prison. I still have that same Quran in my house to this day.
Wow. Do you have that medallion too still?
Oh my goodness. I may have that medallion, so it might be in my mother's house. That medallion, so that's a very, very deep, interesting medallion. That medallion, if you Google the Central Park Five or you Google Yusef Salaam and you see me in a suit like that, there's another clearer photo with me walking and you can see the medallion. The medallion has the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in it.
Wow.
That is that medallion that I'm wearing right there. And so what this shows, and this is like really, really deep too, because we're talking about the Fourth Estate. We're talking about like how organizations like CMOTAP fight against the media. They had already deemed that I was guilty because of the color of my skin. I was presumed to be the darkest one out of the group. I was definitely the tallest one out of the group. And I got a medallion on with the Honorable
Elijah
Muhammad on it. And I got a Muslim name.
Yes.
Oh, they said this dude is a threat. They were trying, say this is like even when we think about what's now. I hope I get this statement correct. They say the victim who can articulate the victim who can articulate what they went through ceases to be the victim, and now they become the threat. Because see, they want us to just remain here. They want me, if I'm able to, they want me to become the next Obama. They don't want me to be who this man is becoming, because I'm still becoming. with all of the things that I'm understanding about this process, about the systemic issues, about how could they put us into the margins of life and expect us to survive?
Can I? So just as I look at the you in your, I'm looking at your eye. You don't look afraid.
Mm-hmm.
Like in that moment, are you afraid? Are you thinking about the possibility of this might be? Because it doesn't look like you kind of just walking, you just walking regular. Like, were you feeling like the stakes of what was happening?
I've always been a person I was born in faith.
Yeah.
And I know that, like, there's a certainty that I know that I will not leave here until what it is that I was supposed to do is completed.
Man.
And so the fear that arrests most of us, I think it was Brother Nuri Muhammad who said this. This is the first person I heard say this. It was beautiful, and I took it and I was like, I gotta tell as many people who have never heard this, I gotta tell them this. And he said, fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yep.
And so in my mind, I'm like, even back then,
And there was some false evidence.
it was some false evidence appearing real.
Absolutely, yes.
But the fear that would cause me, like if they would write me, nowadays they won't send letters like this to us. It's behind a computer screen. You go to the person's profile, you won't see a physical characterization that creates these types of things.
Wow.
You won't see that. But this is just a few. And I'm showing him hate mail. I can read
It's
this
hate
to
mail.
you.
The
But
Lord
these
will
were
punish Yusef for what he did to that poor defenseless girl. He will also be punished, I guess, to your mom
Yeah.
for raising such an animal. He does not deserve to live, and neither do you.
they were calling us. So you got to remember, in 1989, they deemed us unworthy to be seen as innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
They published our phone numbers, our names, and our addresses as 14, 15, and 16-year-old children in the newspapers.
And even went further, right?
Oh, my goodness.
Because this is, for those that do not remember, a guy named Donald Trump published this, and I think it was the New York Times, right?
New York, not only the New York Times, I'm trying to see if the date is not on this one.
No.
He published this was published in all of New York City's major newspapers.
Wow.
And it was released. It wasn't created, it was released on May 1st, 1989. Why is that significant? Because the Central Park Jogger was raped on April 19th, 1989. 2 weeks after we were arrested. This ad called for our death. This ad allowed for Pat Buchanan to write, he went full-on racist. One of Reagan's folks, he went full-on racist. And essentially is saying, well, why don't we just take Corey Wise, the eldest one, and hang him from a tree in Central Park?
He says, if the eldest of that wolf pack were tried, convicted, and hanged in Central Park by June 1st.
June 1st.
And the 13 and 14-year-olds were stripped, horsewhipped, and sent to prison, the park might soon be safe again for women. Absolutely.
But see, what does this mean? If Donald Trump, who was so well respected back then as a real estate mogul, as a business person, people wrote rap. One of my favorite rappers back then wrote a rap song. He said, I want to be rich like Donald Trump and Marla Maples.
Yeah.
That's back when he was married to Marla Maples. For people to associate themselves with this with this person as if the color of the skin didn't give him the complexion for acceptance
Yeah.
and give us the complexion for so-called rejection. But for him to then say, I'm going to do something about this. I am going to use my money. Most folks don't make $85,000 a year right now. This ad cost $85,000 a year. I mean, $85,000 to publish
Wow.
in 1989. That was an extremely lot of money then.
Yeah.
It's still an extremely lot of money now. But he did that. And really what he did gave rise to this letter, these letters, I should say.
Right.
This was a whisper into the darker enclaves of society for them to do to us what they had done to Emmett Till.
It's wild because now he's not whispering.
Not at all.
He's yelling.
Not at all, yeah.
But karma came along because you had an opportunity to write
Clap
you a
back.
letter
Clap back.
when Donald Trump was arrested and arraigned
Yes,
in
indeed.
New York City.
Yes, indeed.
Come on now. So can you talk about like your feelings when that happens? And I remember I think you tweeted out
Yeah.
just one word.
It was
right?
like, first of all, the one word, I mean, that got retweeted so many times.
Yes. What was that word?
Karma.
Yes. Yes, indeed.
Folks think they got away. And I got to tell you, for those of us who are still dealing with trauma, no one ever really gets away. Even if they appear to go to their deaths on their comfortable beds, there will be a reckoning that they have not expected. And they will be one of those who will hope that there's a do-over. You see, I follow a faith, and they know this. It says that on that day, those who are victorious will have the laughter of the unbelievers. And I got to tell you, I mean, think about it. Like, when people profit off of your pain, they built their careers off of the back of the so-called Central Park Five.
True.
They were allowed, like Linda Fairstein was able to retire from the head of the sex crimes unit and become a multi-million-dollar bookseller every year. Every year. Not a few hundred, multi-million dollars every single year. Law and Order, the young lady that is portrayed in Law and Order, is a portrayal of Linda Fairstein. In fact,
Wow.
she said that she used to study under her and they're great friends. Not to say that she's a bad person, but I'm just saying that when you think about how you make this it's like stranger than fiction kind of thing.
True.
You know, so for me to be able to first tweet the word karma and for it to catch on like wildfire, and then for me to be able to publish my own ad, but it's a digital ad, you know, people were saying, you should put an ad in the papers. Nah, we ain't gonna be foolish with our funds like that. We ain't even got Donald Trump money, if he even had that kind of money.
Exactly.
We don't know. But to be able to say this, and to say that I hope the system works. I hope he's afforded the opportunity that we did not get. That opportunity that allows him to go through all of the things that the system should afford him so that they can come to the proper conclusion.
Powerful.
That's karma.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
91 felonies later, damn sure some karma.
Wow.
I want to talk about this transformation from the Central Park Five, which we don't even use that anymore. We don't even use that name, but to the Exonerated Five.
Yeah.
Talk about that journey from where now, like you said, we say the Exonerated Five.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
And
indeed.
you know, because you all went through this together. It's like, you know, the universe brought you all together in this brotherhood. And when we see you all together, it's that powerful brotherhood, particularly rallying around Khari in the way that you all do.
Yes, indeed.
and allowing him to also have that healing process. Could you just talk about that brotherhood that you all share collectively, that this out of this tragedy comes like family?
My goodness. The first thing that I want to say about this photo, this is closer to now, right now, is that we didn't know each other. They made the public believe that we said, hey man, listen, don't forget,
Yes.
9 o'clock, we going wildin'. The only person I knew was Khari. Everyone else we met in prison. Wow. This is why, like, when you see and hear these stories, Raymond Santana and Kevin Richardson, they were the first two that were picked up. They were picked up on the night that this incident happened. They should have had evidence on them, especially when they found the victim and she lost 3/4 of her blood. The only reason why she survived was by the grace of God. Because when you think about her being surrounded by a pool of her own blood, they always say when somebody's bleeding, try to put the wound. The ground was the wound or the thing that held her.
Wow.
They begin to work on Kevin and Raymond immediately. They had already maimed Kevin and made it appear as if he had an altercation with the jogger. And so now they're in an interrogation room, not the same one, different interrogation rooms. Raymond Santana saying, man, I didn't do nothing. I don't know what y'all talking about. The police slide a photo of Kevin across the table. You know this guy? I don't know who that is. You see that mark on his face? That came from him fighting with the jogger. Now we know he did it, but he's saying that you did it. You seem like a good boy. You got to give us something. I didn't do nothing. Well, he's saying you did. I didn't do it. He did it. Now look at the planting of false information. Well, how did he do it? What did he do? Then they show you a photo of the jogger. Come on, Raymond, you've seen a fight before. Look at her. It had to be a brick. They're giving them the stuff, a stick or a pipe. Choose one. They just sit back and wait. And see, this is all like, if we study, even as lay people, we are all pseudo experts. Because if you watch TV shows, or now everything is streaming, but NCIS, CSI, Law and Order, all of this stuff, if you watch this stuff, you know that there is an exact thing when it comes to forensics. They can recreate the crime scene.
Right.
They can look at if a bullet came in, based on the trajectory, the assailant, 6'1.5", and based on the blood splatter, was left hand dominant.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, they can do that.
They could do all of this stuff. But when they did all of this, and this was like also part of the Reed technique, the methodology of wearing you down, of being able to make you more susceptible to suggestion.
Yep.
You want to go home, right? And then they just put it there and they just leave it. You come back a few hours later, you're in a room, if there's a clock, there's no windows. You're trying to go to sleep. They're not giving you nothing to eat or drink. You start living in a delirious state that you want to get out of. 14, 15, and 16-year-old children that have not had nothing to eat for 24 hours?
Yeah.
And so the beautiful thing about this is that the before photo and this photo where we are right here, it shows two things. One is it shows that we didn't know each other and where we started.
Right.
But it also shows, by this photo, we had seen when they see us. We had never sat down as a group, as boys or as men, and shared our stories
With one another.
with one another.
Wow.
So when we saw when they see us, we entered the Netflix studio as a brotherhood, and we exited as a sacred brotherhood.
Wow.
So Khari, and this is the part that's so beautiful about our story, Khari went in to this journey. He went into the storm. Because he said, man, I gotta have your back, Yusef. I'm gonna go down with you. Thinking, oh, we just gonna go to the precinct and then we're gonna ride back together. I mean, I don't know how many of you all have seen part 4. Matter of fact, no, this is in part 1. In part 1 of When They See Us, when they finally arrested me and Khari wasn't under arrest. But they said to him, do you want to come downtown with your buddy? You'll be right back. They might have winked at him like, that's why I winked like that. But now like, you'll be right back. I came home 7 years later. He came home almost 14 years later. But that's not even the fullness of this story. I shouldn't say that's not the collateral damage of the story. The collateral damage is the 5. And as we see, this journey was retold by some brilliant young actors and actresses that captured the soul of our story. Because I would walk into elementary school or junior high school or high school, and I would say, hi, I'm one of the Exonerated Five, or Central Park Five as we were known back then. I spent time in prison. They'd be looking at me like, this dude is lying. Because I had a full-piece suit on, and I don't look like.
I have been with you. And I remember, like, particularly like people like, you could not, because of how you carry yourself and you conduct yourself now, people look at you and like, you could not have ever been in prison because you don't give off that, like, it's just the vibe that you get off, the care that you take with people that you meet. So I've heard people say like, nah, this dude could not have been in prison, like almost in shock.
Yeah.
When you say like, no, I was in prison for 7 years.
But dig this. I wrote this down, and I probably wrote this down long after we first met because I just came into this kind of consciousness. The Central Park Jogger case is a love story between God and his people. It's a story of a criminal system of injustice placed on trial in order to produce a miracle in modern time.
Wow.
It's a story of a people who were buried alive and forgotten. The system forgot we were seeds. And instead of a social death, it's also a story where we get the opportunity to emerge like the phoenix from the ashes.
Absolutely.
Because as they build the fires to consume us, they forgot the owner of the heat. And so this whole journey is such a beautiful journey that I get exceptional lessons from. Because I never forget too, like I used to say, well, why me? And my grandmother and my elders and of course my mom, they would say, God doesn't place more on you than you can bear.
Sure.
And then they would say things like, just let go and let God. Like be still and listen. And for me, it's like that interfaith community that allows for the melting pot of our collected sentiments and understanding provides the way forward. And it's such a beautiful thing because I'm telling you, like for me, I had to get it. And then once I got it, I had to give it away. That's where we come back to the beginning, the political process. Now I gotta give it away. I gotta teach people that what you are seeing looks like a miracle, but the miracle is going to be us finally working together.
Wow.
Because why? Because we can no longer plan for the weekend. We can't just have a 5-year plan. They say some of the best of us have at least a 5-year plan.
Yeah.
We gotta now plan in 50 to 100-year cycles.
True.
And the reason why we got to plan like that is because right now we are inside of someone's 100-year cycle.
That's true. And we got to break that cycle.
We got to break it.
So I did want to ask, as kind of, you see, when they see us kind of recreate, like, so, I mean, when you hear like Oprah, like, I mean, how does it come to you that like Oprah and Robert De Niro and Ava DuVernay want to like take your story and make it into a miniseries?
Oh man.
Like and like how does that? Because I remember you would be texting me, little. I'd be like, oh, this you with Oprah?
Yo, it was crazy because so full disclosure, I thought that our story was going to be the same. Like I thought it was going to be just like when the Central Park 5 documentary.
Yeah.
Like that film changed our lives. Ken Burns, if you follow Ken Burns and the way that he does his films, he narrates every one of his films. When it came to our story, he said, I don't want to tell your story. I want you all to tell your story. He was the first person that gave us our voices back.
Wow.
And when we started telling that story and being accepted and being healed through the therapeutic process of just like, it's like what Dr. Maya Angelou said, right? She said, you should be angry, but you must not be bitter. She said, bitterness is like a cancer. It eats upon the host. It doesn't do anything to the object of its displeasure. And then she teaches us how we all can become alchemists. She says, use that anger. You dance it. You march it. You vote it. She said, you do everything about it. And then she said, you talk it. Never stop talking it. They want your stories and our stories to go away. So when we were in conversation, I never forgot. We were going through a script. They brought us downtown. We were at Tribeca Studios, and we were in one of Robert De Niro's restaurants. And I mean, they brought out the spread. It was beautiful. I'm not a person that takes pictures of my food, but if I'd have taken a photo of that, oh my goodness. And then they shut the whole part of that restaurant down. It was just us. And we had a moment. We had a healing moment. Because see, even up until that point, I still didn't realize that there was great pain still in the room. Like Corey Wise didn't know that he is the secret ingredient in our whole story. Had he not come downtown with me to have my back, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today as one of the Exonerated Five, soon to be councilmen of the same city or the same community. Harlem might be a city, right? I'm gonna say it like that, right?
Yes.
I wouldn't be. But because of him, and you got to understand, I'm talking about Corey, the same Corey that had he said, you know what, I can't. This is too much.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a say I did it when the next parole hearing. I'm gonna just say I did. He went from free to Rikers Island. He went from Rikers Island to Attica. And then all throughout adult facilities throughout the state for the whole time that he was there. I mean, think about the far end of what Corey could have done. Prison, there's a poet that said, prison life in many ways can be likened to the womb. If the life inside becomes stillborn, the womb becomes the tomb. I mean, think about Khalif Browder.
Right.
Now, Khalif Browder unfortunately took his life after he came home from prison because of the trauma, the negative residue of what he experienced. But imagine Corey Wise going through that experience every single day that he is in the prison. Imagine him taking his life.
Right.
This story would not have been told.
True.
And so the beauty of when they see us, when we were in that restaurant and we were having that reconciliation moment, and we were apologizing to Corey, like this was no cameras allowed. This was like phones on do not disturb, like we gonna talk and we gonna have a moment. Then we went up to, they have, I think they're called readings. I don't think it's called reading sessions, but
Like a table read.
it's a table, that's what it's called, table read.
Yes.
We went up to the table read and we read the whole part 1.
Wow.
Everybody, especially the 5 of us, were ugly crying. I mean, we were just reading what this was gonna look like.
Yeah.
So now when the public gets the opportunity to consume it, and they tell me like, I can't, I just have to remind them like, remember, we survived. We survived. This journey, this was the spiked wheels of justice running over us and then coming back to run us over again for good measure.
Right.
And so to see Angelou Ellis play my mother's role and nail it, to see Ethan Harisi play me and make me proud, like what? I mean, this moment is a moment that produces all of the other moments, all of the other things that we rise up on. These are foundations. This is the Sankofa. Because in the Sankofa, I always say there's sacred memory in Sankofa. Because for me, it's the understanding that what are we going back to get? The value, the memory, the knowledge that we didn't come to this country as immigrants. There were a lot of us who were in the bottom of ships. There were a lot of us who were Kunta Kintes. And if you know the history of Kunta Kinte, the real history, they say that he was one of the princes of Gambia. And when they kidnapped him, the government in Gambia sent over 200 of their best warriors to retrieve him. All of them lost their lives. This wasn't just a single individual. This was us as a people. The great legacy that they keep trying to push down, even now. That's why in the political process, there's the effort where there's no desire to make a people whole. There's no desire to say, I want to gift you with the ability for you to believe that you were born on purpose. I mean, can you imagine if we all just stood up and was like, you mean I was born on purpose?
Come on.
And then Les Brown, he went a whole nother level on me. He said, you know, Yusef, I tell people all the time that we were all born on purpose and with a purpose. And I'm looking around the room. What's the youngest person in this room?
Some young folks in the back. Oh, wait.
I mean, it's like young, like.
Yeah.
Well, so full disclaimer, this is the story of the birds and the bees, but cleaned up for all audiences. When our parents were in the process of creating us, think about this. We were all one of over 400 million options.
True.
And we were chosen. That means we're supposed to be here. That means there was no mistake. That means that the systemic push to get us to believe that we were born mistakes has to be wrapped into what my mother said to me when I was 15 and she came into that interrogation room to get me. My mother said this. She said, they need you. She didn't say, baby, how they treating you. She didn't say that they give you something to eat. She said, this was like, when I talk about my mother being my modern day Harriet Tubman, Harriet Tubman who said I would have freed more had they only known they were slaves or they were enslaved. Absolutely. My mother said to me, this was like go time. This is a woman who had been telling me all my life that she was raised in the Jim Crow South. And I had no idea what she was talking about. That I'm thinking that this is the American dream. Yeah. And then we were awakened to the American nightmare. This was go time. My mother said to me, they need you to participate in whatever it is they are trying to do. Do not participate. Wow. Refuse. She couldn't go back into the interrogation room with me. She couldn't go into the prison with me. She couldn't go into the other side of the storm with me, even though she was there. Because when many of us come out of prison, especially the youngest of us, if we were young when we went in and we come out grown people, we are embarrassed to ask for help. The only toolkit we have is the toolkit of my 15-year-old self.
Wow.
It's bananas. Yeah. But to understand it all and to realize it and to, now I gotta tell people.
So I wanna bring Khari Mosley up. Can you come join us, Khari? And I wanna just ask you one more question, Yusef, just about, you have been sharing our stories. You have these 2 books, and you talk about this, better, not bitter, as somebody who could be, like you said, you were done an injustice, a real injustice. We know about it, we've seen it. So you could be like, instead of coming to participate in the system, right, yeah, and coming to help steer a political system, you could say, nah, man, and you have a similar experience as well, Khari. So just, can you talk a little bit about these books and these stories and what inspired you to write them? And then I want, Khari, as much as you feel comfortable sharing your story of those spiked wheels that you talked about as well, Yusef.
Well, I mean, so the beautiful thing about the one punching the air on your left, is that right? No, on your right, punching the air was actually supposed to be my story. This was supposed to be my memoir, but I couldn't tell it because we were in contract with Netflix and with Ava DuVernay, Robert De Niro, Oprah Winfrey, right? And so what I did beautifully with Edie Zaboy, who's actually, she's an old classmate of mine from Hunter College. Wow. We went to school together. When I came home from prison, I went into Hunter College and she was one of the students in the room when the professor re-embraced me back and said, we knew you didn't do it. Wow. And so she becomes this prolific writer, award-winning author. And she helps me to tell the story of the kaleidoscope of all of the individuals that I met along the way. Wow. This book is wrote in a poetry format. I think there may be only one period in the whole book. Wow. But in this book, the foundations of both of my books is my book of poetry. A book that is only sold in the garage in Georgia, self-published, but this book was really, it's still a beautiful book. This book is a book that if you gift it to anyone, young or old, people sometimes say, let me just read a few pages. Man, you start reading this book, you might be halfway through by the time you put it down. Better Not Bitter really is my thesis about what it means to be African American, what it means to be Muslim American, what it means to be run over by the spike wheels of justice, hoping that they make you into a bitter, angry, enraged person. But how do you gain more control over yourself so that you become better for it. And so on the hardcover, it's funny because the mugshot that you showed earlier is the, they say face front. And of course, Raymond Santana on the Exonerated Five photo, he has that same mugshot on his t-shirt.
Yes.
What I said to myself was, I'm gonna use my mugshot on my book, Better Not Bitter. So the hardcover version, that side profile is when they say turn to the side.
Wow.
That's what that photo is. So this photo here is, of course, me contemplating. It's a better photo of now and just the journey itself. But the power of hope and living on purpose.
Wow.
Because if you give up hope, you really, truly become hopeless. But if you hold on, like by the time we're taking our last breath, if we get the opportunity and we did it right, we will already be passing the baton of our deoxyribonucleic acid back to the generations that are coming.
Come on.
And they will already know how to break every generational curse. And what I mean by that curse is that we are not a cursed people. But if we succumb to, just like I said earlier, I had to do the time and not let time do me. When you let time do you, you become an accident of time. All of the things, all of the trials, all of the tribulations that keep us imprisoned, whether physically or mentally, we never come out of.
Wow.
But when you're doing it, and then when you begin to have those moments of alchemy where you begin to bend reality, oh man.
Come on. No, it's fascinating because I'm sitting, in between two soon-to-be city councilmen.
Man.
Right? Both won the primary, both were unopposed in the general election, and both also falsely accused
Wow.
of crimes they didn't commit very publicly. For those that are in Pittsburgh, when Khari was wrongly accused, it was all over the local news, the newspaper, and it was kind of that feeding frenzy of a black man being wrongly accused. And I think what's interesting about you, Khari, is, sometimes we encounter people that are like, oh, if you just put on a suit, or if you just do the right thing and be good. As a black person, that somehow that will be enough to cause you to avoid the system. But here you are, a professional. You're in Detroit to go see Nas at the orchestra.
Wow.
That's right.
You're in Detroit to go to the orchestra.
My goodness.
And you're at a hotel that you paid for, and then you have this situation. So talk a little bit about that story, and then again, how that led you to think about not being bitter.
That's right.
But being a better servant to your own community.
Yeah, I thank you so much. And can we get to give these two brothers a round of applause before we start? It's an absolute, honor to be here. And actually that night, in many ways led me tonight to the stage, and I'll get to that. So many of y'all know my wife, now Judge Chelsea Wagner. At the time, she was the county controller, Chelsea Wagner. And one thing that really, brought us together is our shared love for hip hop music. And y'all know I love hip hop. I still rap. Bringing 88 Back is coming out soon. The single drops on November 8th, the day after the election. So
that's a hell of a rollout.
Right, yeah. I learned that from my brother Jasiri, you know what I'm saying? You got to roll it out correctly. So it was Christmas time, 2018, and our Christmas gift to each other was to get tickets to see Nas with the symphony orchestra in Detroit. back for the 20th anniversary of Illmatic, Nas did a performance with the National Symphony Orchestra in DC where he did the whole Illmatic from beginning to end with the orchestra. So this was 5 years later. This is 2019. We weren't able to get down to DC to do that. So we said, no matter what, we're gonna go to Detroit. It was a Tuesday night. Like, we're gonna go see Nas, do Illmatic, and he did Illmatic from beginning to end. It was like literally putting in the cassette, if you was around in 1994, or putting the CD in and listening to Illmatic from beginning to end, even with, the intro and all that. And it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. And we went back to the hotel, the Westin Book Cadillac, owned by the Marriott Corporation, just so y'all know. We got back to the hotel, and my wife went out, and I'll say this, because this is all part of the truth. She, every now and then, if you ever hang out with my wife, Chelsea, when she's having a good time, she might have a cigarette. And that night she did. I went into the hotel bar and had a glass of wine, and realized when I went to go work out that I left my room key in the room. And I was waiting for her to come to the hotel bar. She never came, so I called her. And she was like, I went up to the room, I got tired. And I was like, well, just jimmy the door, because I'm going to be right up. Not realizing I needed a room key to activate the elevator. So I went to activate the elevator, realized, I need a room key anyway. So I went to the front desk, still remember the room number to this day, never forget it, room 1020. And I went to the front desk, showed my ID, and was like, room 1020. And they were like, sorry, your name's not on the room. Me and my wife don't have the same last name. I was like, okay, that's cool. And they was like, long story short, you don't understand, like, you're not a guest of this hotel. I'm like, hold on, what do you mean? Like, my wife's upstairs. It's like, but the names don't match. You're not a guest of the hotel. And I was like, well, can I talk to somebody? It's like, there's nobody you can talk to. And asked a few more questions. We went back and forth, and I said, there got to be somebody I can talk to. I'll never forget, the young lady from the hotel said, I'm sorry, sir, you're going to have to find somewhere else to stay in the city of Detroit. I'm like, whoa, like, this is crazy. Like, my wife's upstairs. Like, can somebody, like, escort me to the room so we can knock on the door, wake her up? She'll vouch for me. They're like, nah, like, we're calling the police. You're trespassing. I'm like, whoa. I'm like, yo, I'm not going anywhere. They're like, yo, you got to roll. And so we go back and forth. All this is all being recorded, on the hotel surveillance stuff. And later that year, I ran into then Montgomery County Commissioner Josh Shapiro and told him, one day you'll have to catch it on Netflix. So now that he's the governor of Pennsylvania, we might have to have a special screening at the governor's mansion, when it comes out on Netflix, because everything was recorded. So, we get outside of the hotel after they, basically, kick me out of the hotel. And we're out there for about an hour. And I'm like, why do we have to wait for the police to figure out if I'm your customer? What do the police have to do with our relationship as a customer in a hotel? They're like, you're not a guest. So about 5 minutes before the police come, one of the security guards bum rushes me, just bumps me and challenged me to a fight. I back away. All this is still on video. This was all played during my criminal trial. And, I back away. I'm like, yo, I'm not trying to fight you 6 dudes. I'm trying to just get to my room. So when the police come, we're trying to explain the situation, and one of the security guards lies to the police and say that I punched the valet driver. This is when the situation escalates. So they grab me up, throw me up against the police car, throw me into the police car. So I'm in the police car for about 45 minutes as they're trying to figure out what's going on. I'm asking questions, and then, eventually they figure out he's supposed to, be in the room. They go up into the room, and actually, like, anybody knows my wife, she sleeps really hard. So they were actually in the room for about 5 minutes while my wife was asleep, and didn't realize that she was under the covers. And they was looking around the room. And the funniest thing, I don't even know if I ever told you this, the reason why they realized it was me, because everybody knows I wear a lot of Ralph Lauren if I'm not wearing a suit. And I had a really fly Polo Tech outfit on. And there was another fly Polo Tech outfit in my Nautica bag. And I imagine that's the only reason why they knew it was, because I don't think anybody else in Detroit had those 2 Polo Tech outfits. So they come back down, you know, and they say, yo, everything checks out. This whole time, my wife is still asleep. You know, she never wakes up until we get back to the room. So they let me out of the police car. So now I'm mad agitated. So I get out of the car. I'm like, hands up, don't shoot. I'm not a threat. And they're like, what do you say that for? I'm like, yo, this dude just said I punched the valet driver. I've been in the police car for 45 minutes. I'm just trying to get to my room. And so I'm also like mad, you know, afraid, mad, frustrated. So we're walking through the Western Book Cadillac Hotel. I got my hands up the whole time. I just keep saying, hands up, don't shoot. I'm not a threat. Hands up, don't shoot. I'm not a threat. And obviously they're getting frustrated with this, but this is my way of protecting myself because I don't know what these dudes is going to do. So we get on the elevator, and, you know, I continue to keep my hands up on the elevator. And this is all on the body cams. And they're like, you know, you could put your hands down now. I'm like, nah, I'm going to keep my hands up. You know, I'm going to keep my hands up till I get to my room. So, you know, we eventually, you know, get to my room, and then my wife wakes up. And at this point, you know, I'm reading them the riot act. I was like, I need everybody's name and information. You know, like, I'm suing all you MFers, you know what I mean? This is some BS. And my wife wakes up, you know, she kind of calms me down. And then we get to the room, we close the door, and I start explaining to her what happened. And then next thing you know, banging on the door. What's going on in there? Is she all right? What are you doing to her? And we're looking at each other like, yo, we're looking at each other like, what is going on? So then we open the door, and they're like, he got to go. He got to go. He's going to be doing that all night. And we're like, doing what? It's like we hear the banging and crashing. And during my criminal trial, they testified they heard banging and crashing and destruction of property in the room. But then they had to testify there was no destruction of any property in the room, nothing. There was no damage to the room. But they heard glass breaking, ceramics breaking, and other things breaking and crashing. So my wife, being a lawyer, who now is actually the Honorable Judge Charles Wagner from the Allegheny County Court of Common Pleas, she was like, as being a lawyer, she steps in the breach between me and the police officer. And she's like, no, you can't come in there. So they're doing a little, you know, back and forth hand wrestling. So I started to get nervous. You know what I mean? Because I'm like, yo, this ain't usually how it goes. Like, you know what I mean? But she's like, I'm a lawyer, you know, I'm a county controller. Like, you can't, you know what I mean? You can't just run up in my room. Like, this is my domicile. She starts talking legal talk. And he starts pushing her, and they're like going kind of back and forth. So I step in between them. I'm like, yo, you know, what do you need? They're like, yo, you're out of here. I'm like, all right, cool. So then they handcuff me. I'm like, well, what are you handcuffing me for? So then they start, escorting me down the hall in handcuffs. And my wife says, where are you taking my husband? And the officer says, none of your business, and slams the hotel door in her face. So then she comes out, and a lot of this was on the news from her camera phone, so she's filming us going down the hall with me in handcuffs. We get to the elevator, and she's like, you know, where are you taking my husband? And they're like, none of your business, you know what I'm saying? So then she tries to get on the elevator with us, and that's when the police officer grabs her, body slams her, and then cuffs her, and accuses her of felony assault on a police officer. So now we're both in the elevator in handcuffs. So we ride the elevator down. We get out in the lobby. It's 8 degrees outside. My wife is in her pajamas with socks on. It's 8 degrees and snow on the ground. So we get out of the hotel, and they take the cuffs off me and say, yeah, you can go back in now. And I'm looking at them like, huh? We just went through all this for 2.5 hours? So I'm like, oh, Chelsea, you know, come with me. They're like, nah, she's going downtown. She assaulted a police officer. So they throw her in a police car, take her to jail, let me back in the hotel to get our stuff, to kick me out, to send me down to the Holiday Inn down the street. So I pack up all of our stuff, go down to the Holiday Inn, crash. You know what I mean? Like, I just totally collapse. Because I wake up, I still have my coat on. When I woke up several hours later, I thought it was a dream, to be honest. When I woke up, I was like, yo, that was a wild dream. And I look over, Chelsea's not in bed with me. I still got my entire outfit on, and I got the cart from the Marriott down the street, sitting in the hotel room. It's like 7 in the morning. I totally freak out. So ultimately, I end up, getting her out of jail. She was in the felony pod because she got 2 felony charges of assault with a police officer. I got her out. They pushed the arraignment back a couple weeks, so we knew we had to come back. So we get in the car and we're driving back to Pittsburgh. We get right on the highway. We're not even in Ohio yet. Chelsea gets a text message from Marty Griffin. So what happened in Detroit last night? I heard domestic violence, DUI, you punched the cop.
For those that don't know, Marty Griffin is a quasi-journalist in Pittsburgh. You know what I'm saying?
KDKA. So that first happened. You know what I mean? So we get back to Pittsburgh. There's 3 camera trucks in front of our house, every news station, asking us mad questions. We ended up being on the news every day for about 3 weeks. I see my sister Michelle Kinney in the crowd, and I just mentioned her to say that in the year of 2019, there was a Heinz Endowments did a report, and it talked about how the majority of stories about black men in the city of Pittsburgh were around crime. And they said the 3 most covered black men in the city of Pittsburgh in the year of 2019 was our dearly departed brother Antoine Rose, Antonio Brown, and I was in 3rd place with the amount of news coverage, that this story got. So we ended up, fighting the charges. The summer of 2019, I went to trial. A lot of people thought I was crazy, but I went back up to Detroit. It was like Court TV, John Delano and Bob Mayo and Brittany Hoke from all 3 stations covered my trial every day. And I was just charged with disorderly conduct, and I think they threw in disorderly drunkenness to kind of make the story a little bit more sexy. It was a 6-day trial. They said it was the longest misdemeanor trial in the history of the state of Michigan. I got it, I got exonerated. It was, and it was wild because I'll say this, like during the trial, I went to, I testified, and it was all on the news. It's like Khari Mosley's gonna testify in his own defense tomorrow, and people was texting me like, "I'm following the trial, you're winning. Why are you gonna testify?" And I was like, "I got to tell my story." And I was on the stand, and I'll never forget, because my lawyer, Charles Longstreet III, a really dope brother from Detroit, who really held us down, he instructed me that, when you're, and this is instruction for anybody if you're ever, in a criminal trial, when you're just saying normal stuff, you kind of speak to the entire courtroom. But whenever you're saying something poignant, speak directly to the jury. So I was speaking directly to the jury because I felt it was a very poignant point. And I remember juror number 2 was like, "Don't worry, bro, we got you." And then turned away real quick, you know what I mean? And that's when I knew everything was gonna be all right. And then the same juror came out after they were gonna, when they announced they were gonna read the verdict, he came out from the juror room, he came out, looked at me and was like, and sat down real quick, so I got exonerated. Later that year, Chelsea had her felony trial, which actually ended up being, a mistrial, because actually the jury couldn't come to a conclusion, and actually, there was 12 jurors, and it was 9 to convict and 3 to acquit in her trial. So my wife came very close to being convicted of 2 felony counts of assault on a police officer. Now, I'll never forget, we were outside of the courthouse, and there was 3 women. It was 2 white women and 1 Middle Eastern woman. And they came up to her, all 3 of them were in tears, and they were like, "We were not gonna let them do that to you. We knew exactly what was going on in that courtroom, and we were not gonna let them do that to you." And to me, I always say, don't, feel horrible for us, because we had resources. And that was the reason why we were able to clear our names, and why my wife is a judge now, and why on the 5th anniversary of March 5th, 2019. I will be 2 months in as a city councilman at that point. And you know, and the reason why I say it brings us all the way to today because, you know, I was working for an organization. I was based in Minnesota, but I was working out of here doing environmental work. And obviously, you know, this was a story that hit every AP, you know, publication in the country. And actually, the story actually ran in the Twin Cities. It pretty much ran almost in every paper because the story of local elected official and husband get drunk and act crazy and get arrested in Detroit. That was kind of, you know, the narrative that they pushed. So obviously my job was, you know, following very closely, you know, to what happened. And you know, obviously they were concerned about, you know, what happened. And I was keeping my boss, you know, up to speed of what was happening, particularly during the trials and stuff. And then strangely enough, a week after I got acquitted, you know, I got called into the office in Minnesota and was told that they no longer needed, you know, my services at this organization. And I thought after I got, you know, exonerated, I was going to be cool, and then they let me go. That was on a Friday. That Monday, my brother Jasiri called me.
Come on now.
And said, One Hood just got some funding to start a political arm to the organization. What was I doing? I was like, well, I'm not doing anything right now. I just lost my job on Friday. So going back to what you said, you know, the Most High works in mysterious ways. And I don't think I would be here. I don't think I would be getting sworn in as the next city councilman in District 9 on January 8th if all that stuff didn't happen, because I probably still would be doing work in the environmental community. So thank you, brother. Thank you for calling me.
Come on now.
And having coffee.
And
having coffee with me on Baum Boulevard.
This is interesting. You said District 9.
Yes.
District 9.
Wow.
Oh, look at that. Come on, man. They brothers in the same mind. Man, beautiful, beautiful. Can we give it up again one more time for Dr. Yusef Salaam and Khari Mosley, y'all. I'm Jasiri X. This is One Hood. Thank y'all for coming. The leaders that our community needs today. We need people that have been through storms to help guide the rest of us so we can avoid those storms. So thank y'all for coming. Peace, y'all. One Hood.